Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Rebecca Tolbert, who is an LICSW, is a mental health therapist and ADHD coach who dives into the research and finds practical, actionable ways to integrate wellness and healing. She specializes in ADHD in women because she's a woman with ADHD. I'm sure she'll tell us more. And she loves to share her insights with everyone from schools to companies. Welcome, Rebecca. Before we dive into things, ADHD, stress management, life management, and productivity, will you just share a little bit about yourself personally so our audience can get to know you?
Yeah, so I live in Washington, D.C. It is quite snowy here, and the city doesn't know what to do about that. I've got a toddler. I am married to a wonderful man, and I've got a wild dog.
I love it. I love it. Well, we are recording this, in a big snowmageddon. And I think a lot of folks are feeling right now what a lot of nonprofit leaders feel a lot of the time: scattered, stretched too thin. I know from, as you know, and I think most of the audience who've been following my podcast, my own son has ADHD. He's also on the spectrum and has dyslexia and dysgraphia. So that's a state that I know well. So I'd love for you to just take us through, what are some of the key things that help your clients with ADHD and everybody?
Yeah, so the first thing, I have kind of two tracks that I think about when I discuss ADHD and ADHD management. One is more philosophical and one is super duper practical. So let's talk about the super duper practical things first, right? This is whether these are things that you can implement whether or not you take meds or choose to take ADHD meds. I call them the Sempre pillars: sleep, eat, move, plan, relate, enjoy. So I'll say those again: sleep, eat, move, plan, relate, enjoy. And this is all about there's nothing that's going to impact your executive functioning more than your sleep. And if you have ADHD, you're more likely to have sleep apnea or insomnia or any number of sleep issues. And so really learning how to take care of your sleep and prioritize that is going to have such an impact on the way that you show up in the world, the way that you regulate your emotions, all of those types of things. Eating. It's so common with ADHD to be you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh man, I slept through my alarm and I didn't even know it went off and I have to just go. And then it's 2 p.m. You have not eaten anything all day.
Yeah.
You've just been doing stuff. And then you crash and then you eat an entire loaf of bread or a whole bag of chips. And you're I feel terrible. I'm a terrible person, blah, 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 blah. It's a really frustrating thing to manage. And so I always talk to folks about having some sort of easy, fast proteins as soon as you can as soon as you wake up. So that's just like a very practical thing. Like frozen breakfast burritos are great for ADHD. And I don't
I
feel like
love it.
people talk that much, but they're
They
great.
don't. But you know what that reminds me of is like so often, like what you're saying is, I see this true in all elements of like business, both for profits and nonprofits, that to do it well, it is a game of mastering the basics, not being able to do like super advanced things. So, like, for a moment, like it sounds funny, like eat, sleep. But these things are real and people really skip them. And I can't tell you how many executive directors I've started working with and literally coached, put lunch in your calendar. Like, actually write it in your calendar every day. Because that's like the very basic step that gets you closer to eating lunch every day. And it's real. It makes such a big impact.
It makes such a big impact because when you think about an ADHD brain, which that's a whole other conversation to talk about, like what actually is ADHD? What does that look like
Yeah.
for somebody who is an executive director or a manager, right? Because it shows up really differently when you're in leadership. But like your calorie intake has such a huge impact on the way your brain functions. And it's just not something we talk about. Also, hydration. I include hydration in the eat bucket
Yeah.
because everything that happens in your brain happens in the context of water, right? So all of your like neurochemicals that are, like the electrical impulses in your brain system, the wiring, the physical wiring for that is water with electrolytes in it. So
Wow.
if you
Yeah.
don't have enough of that in your system, your brain's just not going to work as well. And so if you have ADHD, you're already dealing with your brain not functioning the way that you wish that it would. And then you're dehydrated because you forget to drink enough water because water's boring, or you take meds. And so stimulant meds are a diuretic. So you have less water in your system. And it's just like it all compounds on each other.
Oh my God. I never thought about that with like the brain and the wiring and the water. Before we go into more practical things, I want to pause for a moment and go to what does ADHD look like in leaders and specifically in women? Because I think there are I have personally heard of a lot of women leaders in the nonprofit space
Oh,
coming
yeah.
to a ADHD diagnosis late in life going, "Oh my God, like, how come I never knew? Like, this is so helpful." So for our audience out there listening who are maybe undiagnosed and have heard a few things so far or gonna hear things in this conversation going, "Oh," like, what tell us a little more about that for our folks who've made it along very far, probably, possibly undiagnosed.
Yeah. So one of the things about ADHD that's important to note is that this is a genetic condition. Like it is inherited. I got mine from probably both my parents. And if it is present across the lifespan, right? So if you are feeling really distracted and really overwhelmed and really like can't get anything done, but it's a recent thing that you've noticed, it's likely that that is probably sleep related, could be related to perimenopause, menopause. It could be related to just like any number of things that are not necessarily ADHD. Um, if you have felt like over the course of your entire life, I have so much potential, but what is wrong with me and why can't I meet that? That to me is a cue of like, all right, let's dive deeper into ADHD. What we see in it can so typically women have what we call the inattentive type. Not all the time, but there's a lot of like probably both cultural and hormonal things that impact the way that ADHD shows up in women versus in men. So typical like inattentive presentation is the girl who was like spacey
Mhm.
or like your head is in the clouds, like your report cards in primary school probably said, you know, really smart, but she just doesn't apply herself. Or her desk is really messy, or, like daydreams all the time. Like those kinds of that kind of feedback in childhood that continues into adulthood where people are like, "Hey, are you paying attention to me? Like, what's going on?" It looks like having a really hard time initiating boring tasks, which is tough when you're leading a nonprofit because it's a lot of really boring stuff that you have to do until you delegate it.
So true. And
So
something never gets said, right? Like, especially in smaller organizations, but there is a lot of boring stuff to do. And, I think you're their first guest to really say that, but you are not my first client to say that. I hear things like, I don't like dealing with the insurance stuff or
me
the
neither.
the financial audit, right? Like, or combing through like past records. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And I think there's a hang up too in a lot of nonprofits struggle with, getting into that rhythm of like donor relationship building because there's a lot of boring stuff like reaching out to people who don't respond.
It's boring.
And uncomfortable.
It's boring and uncomfortable, and I wanna dive right into another symptom, which is emotional dysregulation. This
Mhm.
is a huge issue for folks who have ADHD, and it's rarely talked about because it's not actually in the DSM. So, emotional dysregulation is in the, like, European version of the DSM, but we don't even have it in the American Diagnostic Statistical Manual as a symptom of ADHD, and it's actually a really, really impactful symptom.
Yeah.
And so, one of the ways that emotional dysregulation can show up is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is like, oh my gosh, any like real or perceived rejection can feel like physically painful. Like you're really sensitive, you're really aware of interactions between people, and you're going to like read a lot into that. And so if you're reaching out to donors and they're not responding, that's going to feel physically painful, and you're probably not going to want to do it, which is really going to impact the way that your nonprofit functions because you've got to have people giving you money. And so there's so much that is impacted with undiagnosed ADHD and all of these symptoms that are not necessarily talked about too.
Yeah. So, to kind of wrap up this piece, what should folks do, adults who are thinking, oh, maybe I do have it, like I'd like to get evaluated? Because I think adult diagnoses are almost such hard to find the pathways into the system. Like, it was relatively easy for my child. I once asked about getting my dad, who's in his late 70s, and they're just like, senior citizen ADHD done? Nope. Like, nothing, right? Like, what are the pathways that folks can take as an adult wondering if they have ADHD?
So that's such a good question. And it's different depending on where you are because not everybody understands how ADHD shows up in women and how ADHD shows up in adults. I have a client who got the full, diagnostic panel done, and she sent me her stuff and I read through it. And the person who did her diagnostic panel said, like, looked at all of her scores and was like, it looks like probably she would have ADHD, but she's a lawyer.
Therefore, she can't.
Therefore, therefore, we're not diagnosing her with ADHD. We're just going to stick with the depression diagnosis. And I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing because she very clearly has ADHD. I have given her that diagnosis myself because I can do that as a clinical social worker. But like, they were just wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Being smart, being accomplished is not
And
like a contraindication to ADHD.
actually, a lot of really smart, really accomplished people have ADHD. People who are running nonprofits, people who are winning the Nobel Prize, right? Like, the way that our brains work is pretty phenomenal and can do some really incredible, awesome stuff. And like, don't ask me to like sort the laundry because I will never finish it. Right. Like, so it's like there's such a discrepancy between these two things. And that's like one of the biggest hallmarks of ADHD is like, oh, you're a lawyer and you can't X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I also want to say women who are diagnosed later in life with ADHD, typically from my experience, get an anxiety diagnosis and a depression diagnosis first.
Right.
Because it's really stressful to know that you have all this potential and not be able to act on it. And
Yeah.
it's really depressing to be like, well, I should blah, 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 blah. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? And so I think that that's also like, if you've got all of the things that I talked about earlier and you feel really stressed out and really sad, I would talk to somebody who, like, find somebody who can do a full diagnostic panel, but they know about the way that ADHD shows up in women. I would say even for a man who's getting diagnosed, I would wanna go to see somebody who understands the complexity of how ADHD shows up in women, because so many men aren't getting diagnosed if they don't have the hyperactive presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you find somebody who understands ADHD in women, they'll probably also understand it in men, and you'll have that, like, full spectrum of understanding, as opposed to somebody who's like, "I know about ADHD," and, like, all they know is, like, the hyperactive little boy who's, like, making dinosaur sounds and throwing pencils at people. Like,
Right.
there's so much more. We know him.
We'll go in too. I repeatedly stabbed pencils into his jeans for the sensory and stimulation experience.
Anything to not be bored, right?
Right.
Even pain. Pain is better than boredom.
That's right.
Uh, so
Okay. So it is important that you seek someone who really understands it deeply and especially if
mean,
you're a woman listening, understands ADHD in women. That
so
makes
I would ask
sense.
around. I would reach out to you can reach out to me, like find somebody that, like, knows that circle and can ask around for you too, especially if you're in nonprofits, like, social workers probably, right? Like, so asking around to see, like, okay, who do I know that knows people that are in that world that can help me find, like, the right person,
Yeah.
honestly, because it's hard to find, and I want you to actually get the diagnosis if you need it. And like I said before, if you don't have ADHD, it's really helpful to get the right diagnosis because maybe it's bipolar,
Yep.
maybe it's like hormonal stuff because your body is changing. Maybe it's like sleep deprivation and you need to get on a CPAP and that'll fix everything, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so many things that could be going on that it's important to get somebody who can help you get the right diagnosis.
Yeah. So important. So I want to go back to the practical stuff and talk about emotional regulation because this is something that I know is like it's super important for folks with ADHD and it's also super important for like every leader out there. One of the like primary lessons I often teach my clients who are executive directors is like one, learn to know your own emotions and regulate them
Yeah.
so that you can go into the room with other people, read the room, and then, take that next level of start to learn to help them identify or even regulate their emotions because you need
Mhm.
everybody regulated in a room together if you're going to have an effective group collaborative process like a meeting, which almost everybody has. If you've had bad meetings, you probably had a meeting leader who didn't know how to do those things, and you can't do them for others until you know how to do them for yourself. So what is self-regulation and how do we learn to do this for ourselves or know if we're doing it or not?
I love talking about this. I talked about the practical stuff. This is the like philosophical side of things. Uh, in the book that I'm working on, I call it like the harmony framework. So it's wonder, connection, and hope. And the three of those feed into each other. And so it starts with curiosity and wondering, like, what is going on here? And even before that, let me do like a quick flyby overview about the nervous system and like some theory. So I'm sure some of your listeners like this is so basic, and other people are like, oh, that's super helpful. So we'll just
Never underestimate the basics, though. Every time I hear somebody say the basics, I'm like, listen, this is the good stuff.
those are so helpful because I learned this from my therapist who is not specialized in ADHD. And nothing has helped my ADHD symptoms more than learning about my nervous system and my stress responses. So imagine we as people, we evolved to like a certain point, and then we started changing the environment to fit us, right? So we have the nervous system of like a early farmer, right? And like slash caveman, right? We're like kind of in that, era. There were dangers that our bodies had to prepare us for in order to keep us alive. And that's what your body still does. And so when you experience heightened levels of stress, your body is going to release certain hormones, chemicals, like all of these things to get specific reactions in order to keep you safe. And so you're going to go into one of three states: fight, flight, and fawn. And so this is like your body's preferred way of keeping you safe. So if there's, let's say, a bear and I sense danger, I'm going to either fight that bear, I'm going to try to run away from that bear, or I'm going to be like, nice bear, everything's fine. Like, let's just be cool. Like, it's calm, right? And that's just the way that our bodies typically respond to stress right away. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
These reactions take place in the back of your brain. It takes a lot of energy to get yourself to have those reactions. Like your heart rate is going to increase, you're going to have blood pumped to your limbs because you're going to be able to like run faster. Your, pupils are going to like all of this stuff that happens physically within your body to prepare you to deal with that stress. If none of those, and because this is a back of the brain thing, the front part of your brain does not get as much energy. Your ADHD stuff lives in the front part of your brain. Your executive functioning system is in the front part of your brain. That's organization, language, time management, planning, like all of that stuff. If you're in a state of stress, your brain's like, that's not as important because that's not life or death. So I'm going to focus all my energy on the life or death stuff. Heart, moving my body, all of those things, right? So that's fight, flight, and fawn. If fight, flight, and fawn don't work, then you are about to die, right? If I can't run away from the bear, if I can't fight the bear, if I can't calm the bear, I'm going to die. So my body goes into freeze. And freeze feels like disconnection. You're numb. You feel like you're watching your body from above. It's like a very weird out-of-body floaty experience. Your heart rate slows. The blood goes from your limbs to your core. You might feel cold. It's not great. And even, again, the front part of your brain is just like not active.
Yeah.
And so if that's how you're going into a meeting, that's tough, right? You're either going to feel like you have to fight everybody, you have to appease everybody, or you're just like completely numb and checked out and like cannot connect with people.
Yeah.
And if you are feeling so, like I talked about, like women with ADHD often I diagnose with anxiety and depression first. If you're feeling like all the stress of like not meeting your potential and not like being a good wife and being a good mom and like blah, 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 all of that, like you're not the woman you're supposed to be because you're bad at organization or whatever. that's going to put you in a chronic state of fight or flight or fawn or freeze.
Yeah.
And then your brain is going to work worse. And then you like the symptoms are going to increase and it's just going to get like worse and it gets harder and harder.
Yeah.
And so when you learn about this stuff, you can have some grace for yourself and you can bring your stress levels down, and then your ADHD doesn't go away, but those like negative symptoms are lower, like less likely to interrupt your daily life. So how do you do that, right? Then the question is like, great information, like what do I do? The number one thing that you can do is, because all of this is like a safety mechanism, you have to remind your body that it's safe. It's not logic. That's all. It's like, but they're like, it doesn't make any sense. I'm like, yeah, because logic is, who cares? Logic doesn't matter.
Well, imagine, especially like if it's a perceived danger and not really a real danger, because so many of the things you just described are like, I'm not good enough. Like you made it, not to oversimplify it, but you made that up in your head. That's your perception.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's just as like legitimate a fear as it is to say I'm not in danger, right? That can be your perception too. And I can also imagine how, like, if it is a perceived danger, you're very likely to stay in that chronically, because it also, you then have to perceive it to be over from your own head. It's not going to externally be over because it was never externally created. It's an internally created danger.
Right. Like if you're in the car and somebody like swerves in front of you and then they're gone, you feel that, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You get that, and they're gone, and you're like, oh, that's scary, but it's gone.
Yeah.
As opposed to the like, I'm a failure. The I'm a failure narrative is such a freeze narrative, right? Because if you're about to get eaten by a bear, you're a failure. That's it. It's pretty final. And so when you tell yourself, I'm a failure, then your body's like, oh, good to know. We're about to get mauled by an animal. Let me slow the heart rate down in the hopes that like maybe we'll survive this. It's very practical, but it's like not practical if you're not in physical danger. And so the big thing is that it's reminding your body that you're not in physical danger over and over again.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, sometimes you will be in physical danger. And a lot of you work with people who are in physical danger often. I mean, that's the work of nonprofits, is like keeping people safe. It's really important. And so it's helping your body know, like, you're safe when you're safe, and then when you're not safe, your stress responses are super helpful. And so we don't want to like get rid of them. We want them to be working in accordance with when we need them. So it's a lot of like sensory things that I have found the most helpful for ADHD. And like meditation, people talk about meditation a lot. I think that there's a lot of practical stuff there. But also if you have ADHD, like stab me with a spoon. Like, oh well. So like it's like I tell folks, like, if you bite into a lemon, make something really sour, because it's such a strong sensory experience that it grounds your body in the present moment. Light a candle that you like the scent of and pay really close attention to what it smells like. When you're eating a meal, pay really close attention to the flavors. Take a minute, pause, and listen to all the different sounds in the room. Try to distinguish 5 different noises. And those kinds of practices done over and over again throughout the day, it's going to help remind your body, like, I'm not in danger. And because if I were in danger, I wouldn't be paying attention to this like delicious chicken tikka masala, right? I wouldn't be eating like red hot candy.
Right.
So it's really like taste, touch, smell, sound. What is the 5th sense?
Taste, touch, sound, Smell. Yeah. Good enough.
No, no, you're son. Find ways to engage those intentionally and with gentleness in order to remind
Right.
your body, like, you're
Seeing.
safe.
The fifth
But
one. Seeing.
but
If you see.
I for the something I'll do with clients, I'll be like, "All right, tell me 3 things that are blue in the room with you right now."
Mhm. That
Just,
gets
like, real basic.
real basic, but
But
I can see, like, even, it actually just made me think of it's a marketing practice, and there's so much crossover between marketing and psychology. So, so like you just said, tell me 3. I couldn't help but start to do the work, right? Like, our brains are wired to answer those questions. Like, interview over, I'm checking my background. I got a blue book. I got another blue book, right? Like, I'm looking for blue, right? We got this. This feels good. In marketing, savvy marketers use the same principle, asking questions as headlines. If you're not sure, how to get somebody's attention, ask them a question and give people very, very specific instructions. So, like, don't say, like, hey, donate now. Say, click on the red donate button and complete the form, right? The more specific you are, the more the brain goes right to doing the task. And the more you leave open to interpretation, the less like the brain is going to lock on into that thing. So totally side note, but same principles right there. And so simple again with those specific instructions. So carry on. So that's a great tactic. We're going to keep that one. Fine.
yeah, so I call it the 3S protocol, where you engage one of your 5 senses. So
Mhm.
sense, first S. So like I said, we found all 5 of them. Go team. What are your 5 senses? And then look around. You do a safety check of your room.
Mhm.
So, like, in my room that I'm in right now, it's a little messy, but there's nothing in here that can physically harm me. And that's such a, like, silly question, but it's very practical because we're not talking in logic. We're literally trying to deal with, like, our brain thinking that it's not safe. So you
Yeah.
scan the room, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm physically safe right now." You can say that out loud. It's, like, bonus points if you say it out loud. But you just lay around like, "Okay, nothing in here that will physically harm me." And again, like I said, my room is messy, but that doesn't physically harm me.
Yeah.
And it's really easy when I do this with people for them to be like, "Oh, but I'm such a failure because my room is messy and blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, that mess is not going to, they're like, "But what if I trip?" And I'm like, "No. Are there, like, snakes in your room that are about to attack you? Is there, right? Like, is there a wild animal that will harm you? Is there a person in there that's going to hurt you? If there is, stop doing the exercise and defend yourself. If there's not, continue with the next thing." Oh, sense,
Sensory safety.
safety, and the last one is sigh. And
Mhm.
my favorite breathing exercise is pretty quick. It's called the physiological sigh. You do 2 inhales and a big exhale. Sounds like you've been crying. You do that for about
Mm.
20 seconds. It's your body's natural reset because it's what
Interesting.
you do after you cry. It's also often what people do right before they fall asleep, even if you don't know that you do it.
Right.
But you can kinda, like, hack your brain into being like, "Everything's fine." Um,
So,
so
I have maybe little known fact, unless you spend a lot of time with me. I sigh all the time, and I do it mostly subconsciously. I know I do it as a reset, like, but people often, like people who live with me, ask me like, "Oh, what's wrong? Like, is there something? Like, are you sad?" I'm like, "No, I'm just breathing." And I never
yeah,
think I'm an extremely like regulated person, by luck of the genetic draw. I mean, I practice it as well, and there is nothing like having a kid with ADHD and on the spectrum, and with the presentation on the spectrum that he's often in panic mode. I've had to like super hone those skills, but I just, it came to me pretty naturally. But I never really connected that this sighing thing that I've just kind of always done was probably protecting me all along. It might
yeah,
be
I'm sure that it
whatever
was.
reason.
There's
Yeah.
We don't quite have the time right now to, like, dive into what the mechanism is that's, like, helping lower your heart rate and like reset everything that's happening in the back of your brain. But there's like very clear, it's like really cool
Yeah.
what it does.
So sometime we'll have to go into that because I bet there's all, as you said that I figured it was genetic too, but I have a very low resting heart rate, always have, like, that's just how I'm wired. And that's probably, lucky me, unnecessarily helpful to anybody else. But I know we can control that, right? We can control our heart rate. It's something that my own son with ADHD thinks about a lot. And I had to train him at the doctors, right? Like when they go to like listen to his breathing, he thought it was a fun idea to try to like stop his heart essentially or make it as slow because he discovered early on he had a lot of control over it. And I'd be like, no, no, no. You actually do need to like take a deep breath and don't try to change your heart rate while the doctor's listening to it. Thankfully, talk about good care providers. He has an amazing pediatrician. But these things are real. We're coming up on time, and I want to kind of wrap things up. I know there's probably so much people are thinking about. I've had so many aha moments, and I want to stress for everyone listening, like, but definitely, and there is a good chance, like you said, I think I'm going to forget the exact statistics right now. You may know them. Like among entrepreneurs, like the percentage of folks who have ADHD compared to the general population, it's like in the entrepreneur world, ADHD folks are definitely in the majority, and they still might be a minority population outside that world. So there's a good chance, especially if you're a founder, that you do have ADHD. But for everybody listening, like these principles are important for every leader in learning to do these things because when, like you're talking about like that, like people with ADHD perceiving these danger situations almost like more frequently, more readily, more easily. You mentioned it with the, rejection. What did you call it? The rejection
Dysphoria.
Yeah, right. But if you are an executive director, you probably have not physical danger, but a lot coming at you. So you might have, not real ADHD, but you might be having the same experience just because stuff is coming at you so fast. And these are thinking problems, right? Not physical danger, being killed by a bear problems. And these are the tools I believe we all need in order to tackle thinking problems because we need, like what you were saying, like we need the front part of our brain active.
Yeah.
And if the back part of our brain is activating and taking away that energy, that's not good.
Yeah, it doesn't help with decision making. It doesn't help with connecting with people, which is such an important role for an executive director, like both your staff and your donors and your collaborators and everybody. Like your connection with others is so important, and learning how to calm yourself, see danger where it is and see safety where it is just opens up a world of connection to you that you're not able to access if you're in a constant state of fight or flight or fawn or freeze.
Yeah, so true. And, this brings me back to one of my fundamental, like basic principles in how do we run organizations well that I haven't really thought about in a long time is one of the things is to make sure that to say it kind of harshly, we're leveraging every brain that's working in our organization to the maximum extent possible. And, so we want, right? Like the more brains solving the world's most complex problems, the better. And so this work of getting everybody's brain to work at its maximum is really important. And so I want leaders to be leaving this conversation with you and I, not just thinking about themselves, but thinking about how can I give these tools to my staff? How can I help develop all of them so that they're able to think better in doing their jobs?
Yeah, and your ADHD folks on your team are the problem solvers. And they're the ones who are like probably a little bit frustrating because they're going to show up a little bit late and they're going to be a little messier and a little more distracted. And if you create an environment in which they are able to thrive, that's such a huge benefit to your organization. But if they don't have that opportunity, then you're really missing out on the gold that they have to offer, because right now we need creative problem solvers. Like, you can automate a lot of stuff, you can delegate a lot of stuff, but you need people who think outside the box, especially with, like, all the grants that have dried up. Like, it is a stressful time to be a nonprofit. Like, I'm in DC, I know what's going on, right? And like, it is such a strength for you to have these folks on your team
Yeah.
if you know how to lead them, how to nurture them, and how to create space where they can do their best work.
I love it. Well, for those leaders out there saying, oh my God, I need more of Rebecca, or I want to get my team some help, who should be reaching out to you, and what is the best way to do that?
I love working, just like, give me all the ADHD people, especially the women, people who listen to this podcast and they're like, huh, I really resonate with everything that she said about, like, late diagnosis. Or maybe you've been diagnosed, but somebody was like, take meds, and that was it. I'm not against meds, but there's a lot more support that you can have than just meds. Or if you've, like, been toying around with the idea and you relate to a lot of things that people have said in the past and you're really curious about it, like, those are the kind of folks that I love working with. And I am doing a webinar in February that Sarah will have all the information to. I have a group coaching program, and so I love having people in there as well, and I also do individual coaching. So there's a lot of options for people to work with me if you're interested. I love doing this work, and so I get really excited, especially I've worked in so many nonprofits, so the idea of, like, doing this work with nonprofits, like, I get really psyched about them. So please reach out because I've been there and I get it.
Awesome. And we'll have all that contact info and links in the show notes. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here and all the work you do. And thank you out there for listening and making our communities better. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, review this podcast wherever you're listening to it, and share this episode or another episode with a friend or colleague who could benefit. Until next time, I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.